Hello and welcome to Cooking Character Concepts, where I'm going to tell you all about a character idea I came up with that I'll never be able to play. Hopefully you can find some use in it. Without further ado, let's get right to it. Now, quick disclaimer, I will be using AI art in this video because I am a broke college student and cannot draw. So, the only avenue I have for art is AI. Today we're going to be talking about Ieovard Wrighthuand, the name that I personally have given him. Feel free to name him whatever you wish at the end. Ieovard was the paladin to an adventuring party who got tricked into going into the lair of a Black Greatwyrm. Upon entering, the party quickly realized how in over their heads they were, and most of them ran away, all except Ieovard. Now, Ieovard stands behind and tries to hold the dragon off long enough so that the rest of his party can escape. He managed to hold the dragon back for about an hour, and the party gets away seemingly scot-free. After his battle with the dragon comes to a close, he can feel the meat off of his bones completely removed, and the metal having melted to his bony remains. So, years pass, and after a while of sitting there soaking in that just absurd amount of draconic energy just bellowing off of the Greatwyrm, he resurrects, coming to life with a new arcane core in his chest, that's what I call it at least, that powers his new body, keeping him alive, that causes acid to run through his bones and that almost skin-like layer of metal that was once his armor, and act almost as his blood. Ieovard, from this point on, I would let you take and do whatever you wish with. But for me, what I would do as a DM and as a player, I would make Ievard's new journey be about finding himself in his new time. Being a horrific example of what acid and dragons can do to people, I would continue to make him try to find his own party again. Maybe his old party is still adventuring. Maybe it's been so long that they're dead now, and now he has to find a new party, or something along those lines. I would make it where I would make the story about Ieovard finding that dragon that killed him with a new band of friends, and them helping him finally get the revenge that he so desperately tried to get all those years ago. Now, with Ieovard introduced, let's build that character. Starting in Hero Forge. I personally love Hero Forge. I think it does a great job of giving you so many options, especially with their new Kit Bash feature that I don't necessarily have access to yet, but I love it. I absolutely fangirl over this stuff all the time. So I would highly recommend Hero Forge. I'm not in any way sponsored by them or anything. I just love them, and they're really good for D&D content and just playing D&D. So if you haven't ever used Hero Forge, I would highly recommend it. But that's enough free promotion. Let's get into building this character. Now, what I was thinking was we could build Ieovard before and after. However, then I started to think about it, and it doesn't really make sense to build him before, because all you'd have to do is just take him from a skeleton and then just turn him human. We're going to be building how Ieovard looks after the years of being in a dragon's lair. So let's get into it. I'm going to be starting with a skeleton. Obviously, acid doesn't typically leave you with too many meaty pieces. Yeah, so we're not going to be doing anything with the head, and the only thing we're going to be doing with the body is changing his height to 6'2". That's just how I always set my characters at for an average height, because heroes are always a little bit more above average, and that makes it a new average. So, another thing is we're going to be toning the muscularity down, and we got to give him an ass. I mean, this is what they wanted him to have. This is what we're giving him. It wouldn't really make sense for him to have a waist, but we're going to leave it up just a little bit to add to that vacancy in his chest, to where he doesn't have anything past the ribs, but the clothing kind of falls that way. So that's at least how I think of it. We'll make him a little bit broader at the shoulder. Continuing onwards, feel free to give him any wings, tails, extras that you would want to give him. For me, and the way that I see Ieovard, we're going to be jumping straight down into clothing. Now, I took a minute to scan through all of this and really look at what I like in place of having to sit here and just comb through it with all of you. I really liked the Knight's Challenger outfit. Now, one thing I will be changing is the pants, I believe. So I'm not a big fan of the whole skirt thing. I know it's technically accurate, but I'm just not a big fan of it. So we're going to be switching that out for another one that I find here in a second. Here we go, for the mended night skirt. Yeah, nope, skirt, not kilt. Okay, so the mended night skirt shows off a little bit more of that leg, a little bit more of the armor underneath, and I just personally think it looks a little bit better. We're going to be keeping his boots the same and moving on to his gear. Now, being a paladin, there's a lot of people who would say greatsword, you know, because it deals the most damage. Paladins are obviously very strong characters. Carrying a greatsword is a great option. Now, me personally, I didn't want to just give him, you know, a greatsword, make him hold it with two hands, and that be his whole pose. I had a little bit different of an idea. I'm going to be going with a mace. I think that looks good. Ooh, no, let's go with we're going to be going with a brutal mace, I think. Yeah. I think the brutal mace looks really good. And also, one thing you can add on to this character if you do wish to. Great thing could be having him get new equipment, like maybe a new weapon or a new shield, or just something off of the dragon's hoard that he died on. So maybe this mace could double as like one of those. I can't remember the name of the magic item right now, but the one that goes like slumbering, awakened, so on and so on. You could very much turn it into one of those in mace form, or give him the sword. Either one would work. And for his other hand, we are not going to be giving him a shield. We are, however, going to be leaning into that draconic energy that pulls out of him and giving him a spell in his left hand. Or, yeah, his left hand. Let me see. I think acid spray will look the best once we get the pose right. There's other acid-based spells in Hero Forge that you could take. For example, there's Acid Vortex. I just think it takes up a little too much space. It could work really cool for a acid-themed shield if that's what you were going to go for. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of other spells you can search through here on Hero Forge. For the sake of this video, we're going to be going with Acid Spray. I think it looks the coolest whenever we finally get around to the overall end goal we're shooting for here. Now, for the things along his sides, I really wanted to wonder what a paladin would keep on himself. And while thinking about it, I also wanted to think how he would take advantage of his new, basically, acid production within him. So I came up with the idea of him keeping a water skin on one side. So I would have him keep some sort of water skin on one side. Out of these, I personally like the wine skin the best. And I think it would make sense for this being a bit more of a royal kind of paladin. Not quite royalty, but in a more clerical sense. Wine carries a lot of religious values within it. So having a leather wineskin full of acid could also even add on to the backstory of the character that you add in, or just really anything, honestly. There's so much you can do with this, and I just love how Ieovard turned out in my head. So I wanted to share it with all of you. Now, on his right side, we are going, my right, no. Yeah, his right side. We are going to be placing I think it was called an Alchemist's Journal. Now, the reason why we're going with Alchemist's Journal and not just a bunch of alchemy flasks is because I wanted this to also be his old, I don't want to say Bible, but like religious text. This could be his old religious text that he's now changed to help carry around some of this acid that pulls out of him, or just help him store some acid. Or it could even be his journal and how he keeps up with things now that he's completely new to the time period that he's in. He writes things down that he needs to remember, kind of like how Captain America did right after he came out of the ice. Oh, stay hydrated. Oh, so many people are dehydrated. I'm not gonna go on this rant, but drink your water, boys and girls, and my non-binary friends. Whatever you identify as, drink water, damn it. So, Me personally, I love capes. I think capes add so much to people. Now, there's a lot of capes here, as you can tell, but I want to go with a bit more of a tattered cape. So let me try to find one. You can go with the heroic cape, you know, have it be a bit more of like a standoffish kind of style where he flows off in the wind. The heroic cape kind of represents a bit more of him standing up to evil, like how he did with the dragon and how he could do in future campaigns or in future stories. However, for me, I am going to go with the tattered cape. It's just supposed to represent how he was this heroic visage of hope and this like heroic visage of hope. And now after his death and resurrection, he's able to come back and try again despite just how terrifying he actually looks. On his back, I'm going to be putting a splintered shield to show what he had in life that was then broken. Something maybe he used against the dragon that the dragon just swatted at, shattering it. So he just put it on his back, didn't worry about it because clearly it wasn't going to be helping him at all. So yeah, we're going to be rocking the splintered shield on the back. You could also go with other wounded shields, or even just a gruesome skeleton shield could work excellently for this character if you wanted to go in a little bit of a darker path, have him be a little more gritty now that he's come back to life, having felt death and knowing what's on the other side, and now returned. Maybe he's a little hardened by that, and now he uses a corpse from the lair as a shield to show just how little death means to him now. Maybe you could take him in any way you want. I, however, am going to be following the heroic example. Now, rings are really one thing that I like to deal with in characters, because you could add little dwarven rings, little rings or little things to add onto the character that maybe he doesn't remember because of the trauma within him. Maybe he doesn't remember everything about it. But for me, I am a sucker for just throwing a wedding ring on a character, especially a dead character like this that's come back to life. Just throwing a wedding ring on them, even if they don't remember their wife or husband at all. So yeah, I love adding a little wedding ring onto a character to just add on that little bit of mystery onto them. And you can add any of these. You could even give him a skull ring if you want to go a little edgier, hourglass to show maybe like he doesn't remember it, but he made a deal with like either a time or death patron. Now he's a bit more. There's so many ways you could take this. I'm not going to go off on every single tangent and go down every single path you could go down, but I love thinking about what these little additions can add on. For me, and the way I see Ieovard, feel free to change his name, but the way I see Ieovard, I would give him a wedding band or wedding ring. Now, actually no. Now for the pose. I've worked on Hero Forge for a good bit, so I know roughly what pose I want. Feel free to go through here and look at your poses. I think I want to go with shambling because he doesn't have muscles holding his body up anymore. So whenever he moves, I feel like it would be a lot more robotic or a lot more like labored, especially now after being dead for so long. You know, rigor mortis has set in. It's a little hard for him to move his joints. So I would do this. And I really just like the way that this looks. I think it adds a lot to it. We're going to be toning the smile down. And I personally am going to be doing this, putting the scream feature up to the top, not because he's yelling, but because he doesn't have face muscles, or his jaw just constantly falls slack. I'm sure that there's enough magic in him to let his jaw move whenever he talks, but just naturally, whenever he's not thinking about it, he doesn't have muscles to hold his jaw up. Instead, he would just fall slack. So that's why I'm doing it. Feel free to not go along with that if you wish. And now the last thing I'm going to be changing is I just want him to hold this a little bit lower. Not too much, just a touch lower. Show that he is just trying to hold on to this thing and still swing it with enough power. But I really, honestly, complete honesty here, I'm trying to make it sound fancy. I just like the way it looks a little bit better with that being a touch lower. So moving on from that, the stage. Now, you could add a ton here. Me personally, I'm going to be adding some swamp mushrooms. I think these will add great and link back to the Black Greatwyrm, because they typically build their lairs in swamps or in those like putrid areas. Second thing I'm going to be adding is just another little hint toward the... Hold on. Second thing I'm going to be adding is another little hint toward the dragon by... Oh, wrong one. My bad. 1 second, fellas. Boom, and... yeah. The second little hint towards the dragon's hoard being the gold pieces that maybe he fell on or that got lodged in his rib cage and just kind of fell into his armor. Now we don't have any anything to really edit here because this is all the skin and the body textures. The only thing we have are bones. So we're just gonna go with we're just gonna go with this basic one just to get some bone texture on there. And then the theme, I think you could do a lot here. Really, any of these could work. If you wanted the armor to be a lot more weathered or a lot more dulled by the acid that was poured all over it, you could go with Hallows' Eve, which is the one we are going to be going with. But you could alternatively have the armor remain the same and have this Celestial Crusader style with the undead creature underneath it, just still trying to hold on to that semblance of hope, or whatever deity they worshipped. Maybe it was a trickster god or whatever they did in life. You could make the armor represent that. You could even have it be, a little bit duller, a little bit darker, just to show how much it's rusted and how much the color has faded over time. And I really just like the way All Hallows' Eve looks on this thing. I think it adds a lot, and it's a good middle ground to just the overall look of a undead paladin who's still trying his best to be a hero. Now, for a little bit of extra gruesome texture, I'm going to be adding a bit of a blood splatter onto some of his items just to show how much pain he went through to get to where he is now. Continuing from here, you could add extra blood splatter to the armor if you wanted to, but I'm not going to add too much. I think just this little touch is enough to show off what I want to show off. Ooh. Spontaneously just got a really good idea. I'm gonna give him an eye. Paints. And feel free to just leave him eyeless. I'm going to be adding the eye of a acid dragon into his head, just as a little bit more of a just as a little bit more towards the character and the backstory, just to show how much this thing actually affected him and how much it's still affecting him even after all these years have passed. And the last thing I'm going to change is actually how the shield looks, because I'm just not a big fan of that. So let's see. We're going to go with a rotting harbor. And then for the metals, I'm thinking, rusting titan. So you have rotting wood and a rusted metal outside. You could even go in and change the interior in here to actually be rusted as well. Maybe, do some extra coating like that to make it look like it's rusting, it's rusted, whatever you want it to be like. You could even have the shield be kept in perfect condition if you wanted it to be a fresh shield that you just pulled off the board. But with that, I do believe that this is going to be Ieovard the way I see him. I think it's such an interesting idea to have a person who sacrificed himself so his party could live and follow on to be now the thing that he tried to save his party from is also the thing that's resurrected him. And he has to deal with that internal struggle. But I really like Ieovard, and now let me just really quickly go over what I would do personally for the build for this character. Now, class-wise, for Ieovard, you can really do anything. So I'm not going to harbor too much on what I think you should do, because honestly, with this kind of a backstory, you could go into anything. You could make him into a sorcerer, cleric, warlock. I mean, really, I could even see a druid working, barbarian. The only one I don't think really works is wizard, but even then you could tie it into the alchemist journal. make a bunch of his spells alchemy themed. I honestly, there's nothing in this that I don't think could work. What I personally would recommend, or what I would do, a bit of a Paladin sorcerer build. Mixing those two can be really good in getting you the spells that you like, while also focusing on the aspect of Paladin that you like. And it would give you higher level spells so that you could smite and do more damage. Also, another thing I would do, I would work with my DM and I would ask them if they were comfortable with your smite damage turning into acid. That's just a little thing that I like. I think it goes really cool, and if anything, it's a bit more of a debuff. But that goes back into my first ever video actually about flavor, in which I don't think enough people go with flavor on their character. And there's a whole lot you can flavor in this character, and I think, and I would just love to hear some of your ideas for what you would build or little spells that you would change to help better fit Ieovard here. Now, Now, for a bit darker of a turn, as we talked about a minute ago, to be a bit grittier of a character, you could go with Warlock, the new Illrigger. That one's really cool. That one I think would work really well for this kind of character. Background, I think Soldier or Acolyte would work best from just the core rules. I would probably do Acolyte, simply just to lead back into the Paladin thing, and just to talk a little bit more about the devotion of your service and the oath you gave yourself to, even if you don't follow it anymore after death. Now, as for your species, there is surprisingly a lot of leeway here. And I'm sure a lot of you are just saying Reborn. Now, Reborn works. Reborn's good. A little basic, but it's good. You know, alternatively, you could just go with human, flavor it to where you don't have any skin. There's all sorts of extra little bits you can get into with all of these different races, but what I would personally go with is probably Reborn, because I don't have Reborn. Having a power source in your chest or down your spine, however you want to do that, that kind of keeps you alive. You could even go with something like the Auto Gnome if you wanted to be a little bit smaller, on the smaller side, or you can do Warforged. You could go with Warforged in order to add a bunch of the like certain abilities, like integrated protection, where the armor is literally integrated into your body, and it can't be taken off without obviously ripping most of your bone off with it. So, and then there's obviously the extra little bonuses of constructed resilience, where you don't have to eat, drink, or breathe, immune to disease, you're already dead, what's the worst disease going to do to you? And then you don't need to sleep, and magic can't put you to sleep. It's some crazy stuff. Feel free to take whatever skills or tools you want. I don't really think there's any one specific one that really jumps out to me. And same thing with the ability scores. Just make sure that you max out your charisma and then strength or constitution. Whichever one you want to focus on. If you're doing more tanking and trying to be more of like that undead resilience, kind of like Zombie Man from One Punch Man, I would focus more on constitution. And then if you're doing more like heavy hitter, then obviously focus strength. But yeah, overall, I really like Ieovard, and I think that as a character, I think that Ieovard is a very well thought out character with a bunch of leeway for the DM in the backstory, and then also a lot of space to continue growing even as the campaign continues on, and a lot of lore for him to talk about, and there's just a lot to unpack in Ieovard. But I'd love to know what you guys think. If you have any character concepts you'd like me to talk about in a future video, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys did too. So, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye.